The Blue Jackets get another win in preseason last night against the Buffalo Sabres. I still am not holding a ton of value in these wins. I'll explain why here in just a second on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Hayden Houshorn. With me in the third segment, actually not with me, with Sebastian High, also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, is Jay Foster. We are here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before you go in, thank you so much for making this your first listen every day. If it's your second or third listen, thank you as well. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're free on YouTube, and we're free on the SiriusXM app. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Columbus Blue Jackets get a 5-3 win in Nationwide. A little sparse crowd, for a Wednesday night, but Blue Jackets are making a homestand here. Back-to-back games at home. They got the Washington Capitals tonight at 7 o'clock, so they're making a back-to-back. But before we move on to this Capitals game, which I will preview here in just a second, got to talk about the Sabres game. And I think there were some things that looked really good. In fact, I thought this was one of the Blue Jackets, if not this, this probably was their best outing in preseason so far. Again, I'm still trying not to hold too much value in the results of these games because, teams come in. They weren't going rate the opponent. They weren't going against the best Buffalo Sabres tonight. I didn't see Tage Thompson out there. I didn't see Jeff Skinner. I did see Rasmus Dahlin. So, they had some guys. I saw Alex Tuch, Zach Benson, Victor Olofsson. So they had some guys out there. But Devin Levi, they didn't have their number one goalie. I expect him to be their number one goalie going into the season just because of how well he played the other night against Columbus. But, yeah, I thought the Blue Jackets played their best game. Again, you got to rate the opponent. You got to look at the opponent and be like, it wasn't great. We'll see more when the Blue Jackets play what I think is going to be a watered-down Washington Capitals lineup tonight. The Capitals, played a lot of their dudes in their Tuesday night game against the Bruins. So I don't think we'll see a whole lot of NHL players for the Caps in tonight's game. Saturday night, when the Blue Jackets go to Washington, I do expect to see pretty much Washington's opening night roster because that will be their last preseason game before they kick off their season as well. So we'll know more about the Blue Jackets. But overall, this is just training camp. You just got to remind yourself of that. This is just it's preseason. We all know what preseason is. I don't have to explain it to you guys. Everybody is working out the kinks. There was a lot of times tonight where the Blue Jackets and the Sabres really, but definitely the Blue Jackets just didn't look that good. They were losing pucks. They were mishandling passes at times, and I felt like they weren't facing as much pressure, as much heat, maybe because, this is game 6 or 7 or whatever for the Buffalo Sabres as well. So they're probably a little gassed, looking forward to get the regular season started. I guess at this point, it does feel like everybody is just ready to let's just get this regular season going. The Blue Jackets are continuing to put more and more NHL players out there. That is one thing that has surprised me, just the amount of NHL guys that we have seen play. We've seen Patrick Laine play a few games now. We've seen Johnny Gaudreau play a couple back-to-back games. So things are starting to look like they're like this team that you saw last night against the Sabres. That's your opening night roster, right? Like look at it. Is there a single guy that isn't on that list that you would sub out? Like, I know Denton Mateychuk definitely looks like based off the preseason. Again, this is just preseason, but based off the preseason, Denton Mateychuk looks like he is ready to play in the NHL. However, if you look at who the Blue Jackets have in their organization right now. They just got too many guys that have logged big-time NHL minutes that it's just not worth throwing Det Matejchuk in the fire. They just don't need him right now. Let him go back to the WHL. Let him play one more season as the captain of that team. He crushed it there last year. He was a point-a-game defenseman, and I'm sure he's not going to be too upset about going back just because of how well he played there, and he is the captain of that team. So I expect him to go back. It's sad, but just wait 1 year on the guy. When I look at this decor tonight, I'm like, well, there's not really room for a David Jiricek in here. There's not really room for an Adam Boquist in here. That's where I look at the position that Jake Bean is in. Jake Bean did make his preseason debut tonight, by the way. He was playing with Erica Branson on that third-line D pair, and I thought he looked really solid. He had a point tonight. I feel like you could substitute him out, though, for an Adam Boquist. I feel like you could substitute him out for David Jiricek. But based off the age of these players, I think David Jiricek will probably start off in Cleveland. Again, it's kind of the same situation. He crushed it in Cleveland last year. We know at some point this season, the difference between Jiricek and Matejchuk is the Blue Jackets know that Jiricek can come up to the NHL at any point. So if one player gets hurt, which we know the Blue Jackets' luck, they're going to get guys hurt in their D-core. You just switch them up. You move one guy down and you put Jiricek back in. That'll be good. I guess we also didn't see Jack Roslovic tonight. Cole Sillinger and Sean Corelli are kind of those other two centers battling for that fourth line center. And I thought Cole Sillinger made a couple mistakes tonight, and he's really a guy that can't afford to make any mistakes if he wants to be in the opening night roster. I think we're good with him going back to Cleveland to start the season. And I got a feeling that it's going to be either Jack Roslovic or Sean Corelli there in that fourth line, because Patrick Laine is your top line center on this team. I don't know what else to say. Like, the guy looks fantastic. He doesn't look like a winger that made his transition to center. He looks like he's been playing center for the last 8 years of his career. So that's fantastic. And he looks good with Johnny Gaudreau, Kirill Marchenko. Those guys' possession numbers, I'm sure, were fantastic tonight. We're good there. Your second line center is probably Boone Jenner. And then your third line center is Adam Fantilli. And fourth line, Sean Corelli, Jack Roslovic. Doesn't really matter because those top three lines are going to be rolling, and it's going to be nice. It's going to be really good. Again, I know I started this episode by saying, I'm not trying to hold too much value in what I'm seeing in these games, but the Blue Jackets look a lot quicker. They look a lot sharper on offense, and as long as they get some help in net, they're going to be fine this year. And I actually want to talk about how Elvis played tonight. Excuse me. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Snap into the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. NFL season is obviously ramping up. The Blue Jackets are just a week away from opening night against the Flyers. This app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders. You can build parlays. You can build same-game parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Back here with Locked On Blue Jackets, and I want to talk a little bit about how Elvis played tonight, because he got beat by that rookie Zach Benson again. The 13th overall pick from this past draft. He's a player that the Buffalo Sabres are really excited about, and I hope you saw why. He's a really solid player. He had the game-winning goal in the Saturday night game the Saturday matinee game. It was a 3:00 game. That's not important, but he had the game-winning goal against Elvis the other night. So Elvis, listen, he is showing his frustration after he gives up a goal. So I know that he's probably in a space right now in his head where he is not 100% confident, maybe not even 90% confident that he can dominate this game. But I think he absolutely can dominate this game. He does not look like the old Elvis, but he's starting to. He's starting to look like the old Elvis. He's starting to just make those easy saves. I think that's all Blue Jackets fans really want, is him to make those easy saves. Don't look as squirrely in the net. And I know this is just one random guy just talking about a professional goalie who's been with this organization for 4 years and he knows how to play goalie. But I think he would obviously tell you, like, he has not been the same goalie the last couple seasons, and that's okay. Players go through lulls, but here's the thing: it's good that he is starting to look better. But if Pascal Vincent wants to roll him out the next 2 games and have him play all 3 periods in these next 2 games, that's fine by me. Because hey, I'm not going to be mad at you if you give up a goal in the preseason. All right. No one's going to be mad at you because it's the preseason. It doesn't matter. Just learn from it and move on. Make the next save, you know? I think that's one thing that I'm sure gets in goalies' heads and more than it should. And I think probably the best goalies can push it out of their heads. You know, just the goalies that give up a goal. Maybe it's just like the worst shot of all time, an absolute beach ball of a shot that gets by a goalie. The best goalies, obviously, are the ones that can just move on from that. So I appreciate that Elvis shows his frustration after he gives up a goal. But at the end of the day, I need you to make the next stop. And I think he did that. I think he's starting to do that. I think he's starting to look better. Blue Jackets are still having problems with Daniil Tarasov, who is out with a knee injury. No timeline on when he will be back. If you look on ESPN, at first, at the beginning of training camp, he was listed as week to week. I guess it's pretty much the same, just week to week, which can mean pretty much anything. Again, we've talked about it on this show plenty of times. I don't think the Blue Jackets need Daniil Tarasov until late November, as long as Elvis is going to play okay. When you talk about this Washington Capitals game tonight, I'd like to see some more Aaron Dell. I'd like to see some more Pavel Chyan. I think he's an interesting player. I don't know if he's good enough to be the backup goalie, but hey, maybe. Yeah, I don't know what the Blue Jackets do right now because they're going to have to list somebody as the backup goalie, and it's not going to be Daniil Tarasov because we haven't seen him play at all. So it's an interesting case right now with Columbus. Do you feel good about Elvis starting the season against Philadelphia, New York, the Red Wings, and Calgary? I'll tell you, I feel good about him playing well in 3 of those games. I think New York is going to be a tough game, obviously. But then after that, the Blue Jackets then go on the road to Minnesota, and then they're back home against Anaheim. So the Blue Jackets open their season, which, again, starts in 7 days. Just mind-boggling. Now we're already here already, by the way. But the Blue Jackets start their season in just 7 days, and their first 5 of their first 6 games are at home, which is where Elvis plays better, by the way. I think that's where a lot of goalies play better, is in their home building. But I think he does. I think he just plays better in his home barn. I think he's starting to play better with some better defensemen in front of him. I actually do want to talk more about the defensemen because I think Andrew Peeke and Zach Werenski looked really good. Andrew Peeke is 100% a guy that he needed Zach Werenski last year. You know, like there was Andrew Peeke, like even though he's been with Columbus for 3-4 years now, he's still a young hockey player. Like I don't think he was not ready to take on the load of minutes that he got last year. I think he's much more ready for that type of load this year after going through that. However, he's not going to need to do that. Knock on wood, you know, barring that the Blue Jackets don't have a catastrophe and just like injuries just happening all over the place. But I think Andrew Peeke playing with Zach Werenski is a good enough of a dynamic that is your top D pair. That might be your top D pair, and that's fine with me. I even think Zach Werenski had some preseason moments tonight, and that's okay because again, it's preseason. In fact, all around the ice, I thought Blue Jackets kind of didn't look great at times. Like they definitely were whiffing on some shots, missing some passes. But they were recovering well and moving the puck around. The Blue Jackets are just so good at cycling the puck around the zone. And so much of that credit is given to Johnny Gaudreau. That guy he is phenomenal, the way that he can move the puck all over the zone. He finds the open guy. It's really impressive to watch. And some of the other players have picked off that. But I don't know where I was going with this whole rant. I think I started this second segment talking about Elvis here. And I said all that just to say I think he's looking better. But I think he is benefiting from what is a really solid D-core in front of him. I think the D-core is the strength of Columbus's team, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I really think it's solid. And they have really good top-line wingers, too. Kirill Marchenko looks fantastic. Patrick Laine at center looks amazing. And I've just talked about Johnny Gaudreau. Adam Fantilli, took the lid off the net tonight. That was great to see. I thought he looked really good playing defense as well, playing that full ice game, which the Blue Jackets are going to need him to play. I think he's going to fit great to start the season as the third line center. That's a great spot for him. Don't throw him to the Wolves right away. You got Patrick Laine playing center now, and you got Boone Jenner out there still, who's a really consistent player. And yeah, I'm really excited about Fantilli. About just Fantilli season, man. Like, come on. Like, how do you not get excited after seeing that goal tonight? It's nice for him to shake off. He kind of had a bad game, I thought, Saturday against the Sabres. He didn't play earlier this week against the Blues. So for him to knock that kind of game off his back is a good thing. And, I think everybody's really moving in the right direction. Again, some of the questions for, like, that fourth-line center position, like, is it Sean Kuraly? Is it Cole Sillinger? Is it Jack Roslovic? My hunch is that it's probably going to be Sean Kuraly or Jack Roslovic, and then Cole Sillinger, who had a couple rookie mistakes tonight. He looks good, though. Like, his game away from the puck looks really solid. He's throwing the body around. He's making smart plays, making smart decisions with the puck. But then every once in a while, he makes a couple bad decisions. But for the most part, he looks like a different player than what the Blue Jackets got out of him last year. That all being said, I think he could benefit from some time in Cleveland this year. He's still a 20-year-old, so the Blue Jackets don't need to rush him back to Nationwide anytime soon. Again, another 2 more preseason games left to figure all this out. I'm guessing we'll see some more Dmitry Voronkov. He's a guy that's been competing for a spot, and that's kind of the big name out there. Den Matejchuk, again, is that other defenseman that I think Blue Jackets fans are obviously very high on because of how well he has played in preseason. But there's a good chance that I think the Blue Jackets just stash him in the WHL and just say, let's just wait next year, okay? Let's revisit this next year. Maybe we can get you to Cleveland next year. But the fact that they can't get him to Cleveland this year is just so darn frustrating. And I just think it's best for him to just go play one more season in the juniors. So, but yeah, we'll talk about more of that all just when it happens because, again, Blue Jackets puck drop at Nationwide again tonight, 7 o'clock. I expect a few less NHL players in Washington's lineup than what you saw out of Washington a couple nights ago against the Bruins. I even expect a few less NHL players out of the Blue Jackets lineup tonight. Maybe just throw all the monsters out there. Let the monsters take on the Capitals. And then, heck, just send all the NHL players on the road to Washington and try to beat those guys up in a preseason finale. That one's Saturday. All right, up next, Jay talked with Sebastian High from the Locked On Podcast Network, talking about one of the Blue Jackets' kind of crown jewel prospects, and Stanislav Svozil. This guy who is we haven't seen much of him at all this preseason, which is surprising, but I think he's a player that you'll find is really, really exciting. And I'll let Jay and Sebastian tell you more about that next here in just a second on Locked On Blue Jackets. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting. Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. So Indeed knows when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon, Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
But I want to talk about someone that we just talked a little bit about, actually, and that's someone that I'm really high on in this organization. And right up until they took Jiricek and Matejchuk, this guy was like, okay, this is my favorite defense prospect. I want to talk about Stanislav Svozil, who had just an absolute monster world juniors, just gone. Played in the NHL, made his NHL debut at the end of last season, had a monster season in the WHL, playing with some guy named Connor Bedard, if you've heard of him. How do you see Svozil finding a path to the NHL? Because we talked about it a little bit in the last segment about Matejchuk. It's kind of clogged. The NHL path is at the minute. And so I'm looking at Stanislav Svozil, who in my mind is another option for a potential NHL spot, but he's got to beat out like 6 guys to get there. So where do you see Svozil kind of falling this season?
Svozil is the one defenseman in Columbus's depth chart who, in my mind, is a candidate of being like way too good to like lose to the development curse of just like staying in the AHL forever and just like not really panning out. I think he's too good to have that fate, but I don't know if there's space for him. So he might be the defenseman that gets moved in a trade of some sort just because there is no roster spot for him, unless injuries happen again, as they did last season, and then he's going to be playing top pair minutes before you know it. But Svozil's a player that I have been a big fan of for a really long time. Going back to his draft year, I had him ranked top 20. I was a really big fan of him in his draft year, and he was a pure defensive defenseman as a draft eligible. In his draft year, he's playing in Europe, and his U18 tournament wasn't the strongest, which led him to fall down draft boards. And I still would have picked him inside the first round, but he fell all the way to the third. And I mean, you guys got excellent value there. And in the WHL, he really learned how to really layer a lot of offensive tools into an already solid defensive toolkit. So he was already a pretty strong skater. He was really good at matching the footwork against opposing forwards on the rush. And in the WHL, he learned to kind of use that to layer lateral mobility into his own puck rushes going up the ice. And he learned how to become a bit more deceptive and creative offensively. And as Connor Bedard became Connor Bedard before our eyes in the WHL, Svozil had the best teammate possible. He had a cheat code that he could play with consistently, and he used that. He was one of the few players in Regina that was consistently using the talent that is Connor Bedard to push his own game forward consistently, game to game. He was using that skill that he had available to him to push himself, and it was great to see, and his stock skyrocketed afterwards. And he was really learning how to become a far stronger playmaker with that high-end talent that he was playing with. And he's still going to have that in Columbus. And he's going to have a ton of really high-skilled players to play off of. So he's a player that I'm a massive fan of. And I like every year at the draft, I have this thing where I basically jot down a note of the player that I would have drafted for a Montreal Canadiens draft slot. So going back to the 2020 draft. And Svozil was in that 2021 draft class for me. I would have picked him in the second round with one of the Habs draft picks, which they ended up using on like Luke Tuck, which wasn't the greatest pick. I'm happy with mine on that one with Howe's age. And he's only gotten significantly better since then. Like, he's a great transition defender. His defensive game is still really, really strong, and it's what he really built his draft stock on. But the fact that he's built such a strong offensive and transition game on top of that in the years since, it makes me so optimistic for his projection. I think he's going to be a really solid second pairing defenseman for a long time. I just don't know if that's going to be in Columbus or not.
Yeah. Is it? I feel like every time you see a player that has a really good season next to, so like I always think about how when in Connor McDavid's draft year, everyone was like Dylan Strome only got that many points because he was playing with McDavid, and I think the same thing happened with Alex DeBrincat. Already hearing about Gavin Brindley, how he was only got these goals because he was playing with Adam Fantilli, and you get the same thing with Svozil. Like how I'm not worried that Svozil is just a product of Connor Bedard, but like, can you talk a little bit about that and kind of how, like, what part of his game makes you believe that he can be an extremely good player, even when he's not passing to Bedard?
Yeah. I think so much of Svozil's value came from things that can't really be related to Connor Bedard. For instance, his transition defending was not that good because of Connor Bedard when he was already a draft eligible and wasn't even playing in North America yet. He has a lot of really, really awesome strengths. The production, sure. I'm not going to make an argument that I think that Svozil is going to be a 50-point-a-season defenseman in the NHL. That said, I think he has the potential to be a really, really, really solid two-way piece. I think before playing with Connor Bedard, he was stronger defensively than offensively, whereas now I wouldn't say that anymore. I think he's just as good at either end. He's become a true 200-foot defenseman, and that's not something that is really reliant on playing with a particular player. It'd be different if he were, in my projection, a pure playmaking defenseman, where a lot of the value of his play comes from like his assist totals or his power play distribution, and where that's really like the crux of what makes a player valuable and projects as an impactful NHL piece for those reasons. But that's not really the case with Svozil. He's so well-rounded, and he's not this good of a prospect because he put up a lot of assists, for instance. I don't look at production very much at all. Like production every year that I keep scouting becomes less and less of a factor in my evaluations. They're still like, I still think point totals are useful as barometers for prospects, but they're so far from the be all end all. And I think that Svozil playing with Bedard pushed Svozil to improve his own game rather than just padding the stats. It was really quite a fundamental shift in how he approaches the game in the 2 years after he played with Connor Bedard. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about his totals just being like plastered and pumped up because of Connor Bedard here.
Yeah, it is extremely reassuring. Like I was pretty certain that like all of like every time I watched his game, I was like, I feel like this is not a product of it, but it is reassuring to know that someone who actually does this as a living agrees with me. I find that extremely validating.
That's all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you for making this your first listen every day. For those that do, Jackets on the ice tonight at 7 o'clock against the Washington Capitals. Jay and I will have more content for you guys on this page. Subscribe if you're watching here on YouTube. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. My name's Hayden Househorn. You can find me on Twitter at HaydenH971. You can find Jay on Twitter at _JKOB, FORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. You can also email us, lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.